Thank you. Welcome to Orange County Farm Supply. Um, Fruit and Berry February this month. All month we're selling our berry plants, whether it's a strawberry, um, blackberries, blueberries, etc., raspberries. They're going to be discounted the whole month, as well as fruit trees. So today I want to talk about growing mostly berries, not so much fruit trees today. Um, I started growing blackberries when I was a kid. I started with the Olalla berries, and gentleman who worked at this counter right here, his name was Don Burdick. He has an acre up in Orange Park Acres, and he had them growing on his property. He gave them to me when I was before I was even a teenager. Um, they're so easy to grow, and I love them. So if you are curious about Olalla berries, try Olalla berry pies at Polly's, and they're usually in season in June. Marie Callender's used to have uh, Olalla berry pie, but I think they said it was Olalla berry pie, and I could tell it was boysenberry, so they started switching. So I recommend Polly's if you ever want to try it. So Olalla berries, the origin of Olalla berries, uh, they're a cross between a loganberry and a native blackberry. And what a loganberry is, a gentleman, a judge up in Santa Cruz, uh, crossed an American blackberry with a raspberry, and that's how they got the loganberry. So a lullaberry has a little bit of raspberry in it. Now the big difference between blackberries and raspberries, blackberries have a core inside the fruit. The raspberry is almost like a thimble. You could put it on your finger, so it, just like a cap, if you will. There's no core inside. Now raspberries, they come red, they come yellow, they even come black. Blackberries, kind of the same thing. There's different colors of blackberries. So growing Olalla berries or blackberries, what I recommend doing is having stakes, usually 8 or 10 feet apart, probably about 6 feet high. And what I like to do is train them, because most blackberries are trailing. There are blackberries that are called primo cane or prime cane. And prime cane blackberries are erect. They're thicker than my thumb. I have some at home. They're over an inch in diameter, and they grow straight up to the sky. And their thorns are terrible. So what I recommend doing is taking 2 parallel galvanized wire, 12 gauge, one here, one here. And when you start your Olalla berries, you put them in between the T-posts or wooden posts, whatever you prefer. And when a trailing blackberry, such as an Olalla berry, will grow upright as long as you trellis it. And what I do is I will wind it like a coil, because a trailing blackberry could go 30 to 40 feet in a season. Here's another one, same thing. And here's another one. They get more sun this way, and if I had my way, I'd make sure my T-posts or my fence posts went north or south and not so much east or west. That way, in the course of a given day, they're going to get maximum exposure to sun. Blackberries love full sun if you can find a full sun location. The pH of the soil, they can take any pH. I shouldn't say any pH, but our pH range is usually a little bit alkaline, a little bit above 7. So you don't have to worry about acidifying so much with blackberries. The pH, you can grow them 6.8. That's perfect pH. They can go up to 7 or past 7. 7 is neutral. 7 plus. What'll happen, the first year's growth, you can coil them and train them like that. The following year, then they will flower. So you leave these up. The second year, when they have all this exposure to the sun being coiled like that, then you get clusters of 3 or 4 where the flowers tend to cluster as well. So they're not like independent berries here and there. They'll usually come in a cluster of 3 or 4. Alala berries are about 1.5 inches, sometimes 1 3/4 inches long. So I have a blackberry at home called it's an arc. There are very, very nasty thorns on it, and that's the one that has a primocane instead of a trailing. And I don't have to trellis them. They just go straight up, and those are extremely productive. And the berries are like 2 golf balls. They're like this. The only nasty thing is the thorns are like a rose. The thorns on alala berries are quite manageable. I can deal with them with my bare hands. But with my arc blackberries, they are just nasty. They have really thick thorns. Yes, you can. But raspberries is a whole nother microclimate we'll have to get into. So after these produce, the following year, you're going to have new shoots coming up from this root system. You'll have new rhizomes. And what will happen is they're going to be growing like crazy. Well, after you pick these, then you want to cut these down and train these guys to do the same thing. So usually I cut my my alala berries back in October, the ones that produced fruit earlier. So I'll cut them down to maybe 3 or 4 inches.
And you remove all the coiled section as well. So
yeah, so this will be removed. The new one is going to replace it, and I just kind of do the same coil type of thing. Usually, most blackberries in Southern California, you can start picking as early as May, but they'll go all the way into June. Now, I like certain fertilizers, and I put a couple on the table here because I know a lot of people like organics. These are both certified organics. This is True Organics Berry Food. It's a 544 with calcium and sulfur. The thing I like about True Organics, they're pellets. Down to Earth, this is also certified organic, and it's a 436. It's very dusty and powdery. I prefer things that are pelletized. It's just easier to broadcast or spread, but they both work very well. Now, I'm kind of old school, and this is not organic. There's your nitrogen here, there's your phosphorus, there's your potassium. I've been using this since I was a kid, and I continue to use it to this day. This is a pellet. It's a 50-pound bag. We call it Crop Maker. That's our nickname for it. And you have a very low nitrogen, but a high phosphorus, which promotes roots and flowers, and a high potassium, which gives you cane strength, thickness, and it's also, potassium is very important for sugar movement and fruit development. So using a fertilizer like this will encourage larger berries, more berries because of the flowering and the fruiting aspect. So sometimes they will, late in the season, right before picking, like maybe around April or May, you can give them a higher nitrogen, and that will actually enlarge the berries even a little bit bigger. We're kind of going away from the low nitrogen here. So you could use like a ammonium sulfate, like a 2100 or urea. And if you want to do it organically, you could use blood meal. And that's a 12 nitrogen. Raspberries are a little more challenging for me because I live in North Orange County. Louder? Okay. Um, it's too hot for raspberries if I gave them full sun, and I cannot grow mine in full sun. They just burn up, even if I watered them every day. I'd have to give them shade cloth. So my raspberries are in a north exposure. In other words, against a house or a wall or something that's facing north. So they're getting some type of shadow most of the time. Now, with the exception of June and July, those are the months where the sun's overhead no matter what. They're still going to get sun. But at least the rest of the year, they're going to be in some type of shadow. So all my raspberries that I grow, being in inland North Orange County, I have to find north exposures. But growing raspberries, you can do the same thing. You can trail them with the 2 parallel wires, 12 gauge, or you can use just a trellis. I also grow a black raspberry. It's called Munger. In fact, I think we have one right here. And I love that. It's a little black cap. The thing about black raspberries, they're exceptionally sweet, but they're hard to store because they're so high in sugar. So they don't keep very well. So when you pick a black raspberry like Munger, you got to use them up or freeze them immediately. Yeah, they don't have the greatest shelf life. Blackberries do because they have that core inside, where the raspberries, like I said, a thimble. So they tend to fall apart or dry out just because they don't have that inner core. So I've been doing these since I was a kid, and I tried all types of berries that our family would go up to Oregon. I'd dig them up from the forest, bring them home, try them. For the most part, I had pretty good success even bringing them down here. But the Yalala berry, which I consider the best tasting blackberry, was actually developed with the University of Oregon, and they developed it to be grown up there. They found out it grows better in Central and Southern California than it does in Oregon. So that's why they do so well here.
Can you go back to the fertilizer? What months do you feed?
So I just put down my fertilizer in February. I did mine the 1st of February, which is just a few days ago. And I did it before our nice rain. And I will do it every 6 weeks, all the way up until just about picking. And if I want to finish the fruit with a high nitrogen, I would do that in May, right before June, because the berries will be forming. The flowers will come in March, April, and then your berries will be forming in May. And they're still kind of unripe. They'll either be kind of off-white or starting to turn red. You can push the nitrogen just to get a little more size in May. Train of thought. So I was talking about, I forget. I'm sorry.
You're talking about the olive berry.
Yeah, so
growing better here than in Oregon.
yeah, and then if you've heard of Marionberry, it came from the Yalala berry. So the Marionberry, which is now the big commercial variety up in Oregon, is a descendant from the Yalala berry. So blueberries, they do not grow in our ground. They don't like it. You could try growing them in the ground, even if you acidify them. We're too alkaline here. Our water's alkaline. You put them in the ground, they'll just exist. They may do some, some people dug big, deep trenches and imported like peat moss or something very acidic, and they'll do okay, but the roots still touch the native soil in time, and they just don't like our native soil. So I like growing blueberries in a 15-gallon, I think is a little bit small. That's why I like a 20-gallon like this, or as big as a 25-gallon. And if you even go with a 25-gallon, which is a little bigger than this, you could put 2 plants in a 25-gallon. But if you use a 20-gallon like this, I only recommend 1 blueberry per container. And what I like as far as the the substrate is peat moss and pumice, about a 70 to 30%, 70% peat to 30% pumice, or a ratio of 7 to 3. And mix it up. You don't have to put a layer of pumice or anything on the bottom. So peat moss by itself, it becomes too wet and it'll become boggy. It won't drain, it won't breathe. So that's why the pumice, which also could be substituted with perlite, which I'm not a fan of perlite because it breaks down, becomes powder, settles at the bottom, holds water when it's not supposed to. Also, perlite sometimes floats to the top and blows out.
Would it be the same for smart pots?
Okay, the question is, for smart pots, you want to do the same thing. Smart pots are like a felt bag. They breathe from the side. Smart pots are really good for growing blueberries. So pumice, it's a volcanic ash rock. It's going to create drainage, and that way the substrate will breathe and drain. Now, inland Orange County, I give my blueberries full sun for about 9 months. Then, after I'm done picking, I end up dragging them and I put them underneath my orange trees or some other trees because I'm too far inland. Other parts of the county, you could keep blueberries in full sun all year. But where I am, I have to drag mine. So as you can see, this blueberry here, this is a sunshine. It's already flowering. It's going to set fruit by later this month. And you'll see the fruit forming March, April. And you'll be picking usually by April, May on most blueberries. And there are different types. There's many varieties of blueberries, but there's standards and then there's high bushes. And the high bushes can get really tall. And it's good if you use more than one variety of blueberry. That way they can kind of help pollinate each other. So you can get fruit on one blueberry by itself, but it's better to have two and not the same variety. I would have, example, my past favorite, which seems to hard to get lately, is the South Moon. And the South Moon, they're nickel-sized blueberries, incredible, and that's a high bush. And you could take a standard like a Sunshine, which these do not get tall. This is a standard blueberry. And having them in proximity, you'll get more production that way. So with blueberries, the only time I'm pruning is usually in the winter because these things will get bigger and bigger, but the lower branches will kind of die back. So you can cut off the older twigs near the bottom. But really, they really don't benefit on pruning anything, as far as the new growth that's happening. So I would encourage, after your picking is done, usually around May, just keep fertilizing with the acid fertilizer like these. And that way they're nice and big the following year. And again, they'll start flowering usually sometime in January, February. Does anybody have questions about varieties of any type of blackberry or raspberry? I've never seen a thornless raspberry, but yeah, they're thorny and they are trailing kind of like this. So they do need to be trellised or trained with 2 parallel wires. So some raspberries, they actually have what are called everbearing. And the first year you plant them, they'll fruit, which you don't have to wait for the second year like you do with most blackberries. So that's an advantage with the everbearing raspberry, such as Baba, Oregon 1030. Those are varieties that I know that will bear the first year you plant them. Baba, I've seen at nurseries around. I've seen them at. I wish we could get them. Armstrong usually has Baba. I'm sorry, your question?
Do you fertilize the blueberries as you do the blackberries where you mid, with the fruit starch you put?
Okay, the question is, can you fertilize your blueberries the same way you do the blackberries later in the season? You start off with using 6-24-24 or organic one, but later to enlarge enlarging the berries, you could use blood meal or a high nitrogen synthetic like ammonium sulfate or urea. Yes, you can. But then, if you do use the chemicals, you're deviating away from doing it organically.
The lady was asking if there are some thornless berries, and there is the church in the San Juan Capistrano. They have a piece of where they grow a lot of vegetables. It's called a peace fruit. They have a thornless berries around.
Yeah, we have. The question is, are there thornless varieties of blackberries? The best one I know is either Columbia or Arc Freedom. And those blackberries are gigantic, just like what I call the Arc that I grow, which has the thorns. So the Arc Freedom is the same huge blackberry without the thorns. And they're more erect, but at least they don't have thorns. So last year I already tore out all my Arcs, and I'm putting in Arc Freedoms this year because I'm done with the thorns.
Is there a secret to when you have a community garden spot and it's been neglected, and now I have it everywhere, to get rid of them?
Yeah, so the question is how to get rid of blackberries, because what'll happen if you ignore them, they'll keep growing, and if the blackberry touches the ground, it'll start propagating or self-propagating. The only thing I would recommend, especially in a community garden, is dig them up. They're real easy to dig up. I have blackberries that actually come up from seed because the birds get so many of mine, and they drop them in the darndest places. So you have to kind of keep on top of them, because I've had some of those Arc ones with the thorns just come up in the wrong spot. And yeah, they're really hard to manage if you ignore them. So I would just recommend digging them up. I wouldn't use any chemicals.
Are the roots like super deep?
No. Blackberry roots usually go maybe 8, 10 to 12 inches deep. A blackberry plant and most raspberry plants can last 10 or 15 years, sometimes 20 years, the actual root mass from a single plant. And every year you'll see the same rhizomes come up in the same spot where the root ball is, or the rhizosphere. They like to be mulched. My favorite mulch is called R&M, and it's a cow manure base, and it's the only mulch. It's the only mulch that we carry that has an NPK on it. It's a 1.25, 2.5. So it's actually got nutrient value. Now, blueberries, I would mulch with something acidic, like an acid mix. You could use peat moss if you can find it, oak leaf mold, pine needles. They're all good mulches. Mulches will conserve water, block weeds, eventually break down and become humus.
I have an online question here. Other than blueberries, are there other berries you can grow in a pot on your patio?
You can grow blackberries and raspberries in containers and raised beds. So the question is, can you grow other berries in containers other than blueberries? Yes. Blackberries, raspberries, no problem. There are other berries that aren't very common around here that some people want to try. They're called red currant, black currant, gooseberries. I don't know a whole lot about them. I've never tried them. but there are other berries out there that, some people are just into it, because I like making cobbler. My blackberry cobbler, I just love. I used to make blackberry pies when I had the time, but blackberry cobbler is just wonderful. Whole milk, that's the key, whole milk. I forget the flour. It's a special flour. It's a rising flour that you buy, and you put some. I use a 9-inch Pyrex, and I put it in the oven for a good half hour at 350 degrees.
We'll post the recipe.
There's a question on the thornless boysenberries. Can you speak on that plant in particular? Is the fruit good?
So I've tried the question is, how are thornless boysenberries? Boysenberries, I'll just go to a brief history. It wasn't developed by Walter Knott. He took over the Boysen farm. Boysen left them. They were covered in weeds, and he salvaged them. He brought them to Buena Park and then made the boysenberry famous, because somehow Mr. Rudolph Boysen, who invented or came up with the cross of the boysenberry, which I think has to do with a raspberry and a blackberry meeting. Anyway, during the 1930s, that's where the boysenberry became famous. But boysenberries typically have thorns. So I've tried thornless blackberries, and I find that they're not very productive. And in general, boysenberries are not sturdy plants. All boysenberries, the thornless ones are especially low producers. The thorny ones produce a lot more, but both the thornless and the thorny boysenberries are more susceptible to insects, diseases. When I'm talking insects, I'm talking scale and rust and mildew. The way you treat those, by the way, if you do ever, and I've had those issues on my Olalla berries in the past. Horticultural oils, they're organic, they're safe. Never spray oils when they're flowering, but you can spray oils after the fruit set or before flowering. But I find that every boysenberry that I tried that was thornless, very, very, very few. I'd say 25% of what I would get with a Olalla berry, for example. But the one that I found was the most productive, and the one that just tears me to pieces, is that ARC for Arkansas, and they're just gigantic, and they are so productive. I have, and I just tore them out. I had them for about 12 years. I had about 12 feet of them, and hundreds of berries, and they're all consistently gigantic. So I can't wait to try the Arc Freedom. I'm going to put those in probably this month. Any questions on blackberries, raspberries, blueberries? So Heritage is a good red raspberry, and there are other ones, but my favorite is Baba. B-A-B-A. B-A-B-A. The story with Baba, I think somebody found him growing somewhere in San Diego County, and the grandson or grandkid said, "Oh, Baba," for grandparent or grandma or something. And I think the name stuck, and they called them Baba berries. I wish we had Baba berries. But like I said, I found them at the Armstrongs, the chain. Yes.
Do Olalla berries have a core?
Olalla berries have a core. The question is, do Olalla berries have a core? Yes, they do. Even though they're related, their lineage comes from raspberry and blackberry. It still has a core. So a true raspberry is coreless, like a thimble. I remember this one berry that I know it grows in Michigan and it grows in Northern California and Oregon. It's called the thimbleberry. It's huge, but the little droplets on it, they're tiny, not like this. They're real small, but they'll fit over probably my thumb. It's the largest raspberry I've ever seen, and they're called thimbleberries. And I've tried to grow them here. They don't like it. It's not cold enough for them. But I have a co-worker here whose cousin's dad sent me thimbleberries from Michigan in a jar. They were preserves. Love them. So any questions on soils, substrates, mulches, pumice? You can put pumice in the ground too when you cultivate your blackberries in your native soil. That makes them drain a little better. But blackberries adapt very well to this area.
We said a mixture of hummus, plus.
That's for your blueberries in containers. About
And then should you add that on?
you could put it in there a little bit, but I'd really like to rather use this on top. Let it filter down in time. If you look at this compost, it's like coffee grounds. There's no wood in it. That's why I like it. So we have a speaker coming up on next Saturday, Julie Bowden Davis, on the 15th at 10 a.m. She wrote the strawberry book, and she's very good. She knows strawberries very well. And my favorite strawberry, by the way, that she loves are alpine strawberries. You grow them from seed. They're not bare root. But yeah, strawberries will be coming a week from today here, and Julie Bowden Davis will be our guest speaker. So please come, and thank you for coming. Any questions? Week after that, I'm doing the talk on the final Saturday on fruit trees. So I'll talk about growing them. I'm going to draw a picture. I'm going to draw a picture on how to plant trees. I'm really good at planting trees. I put pipes in the ground. I'm very thorough about how trees should be planted, whether it's a fruit tree or a shade tree. Doesn't matter. I'm very passionate about planting trees. And I'll go over that, how to prune them in the winter, how to treat them in a dormancy, how to feed them. So thank you for watching. Thanks for coming.